On a rain-soaked Chicago night, Serafina Vale stumbles into a cafe to replace her best friend on a blind date, only to discover the man waiting isn't some harmless businessman. He's Lucien Moretti, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, a man who rules through violence, silence, and absolute power. But when she laughs with flour-covered hands and honest eyes, something inside the ruthless kingpin cracks open. For the first time in years, Lucien Moretti wants something he cannot take by force. He wants her. And that obsession will drag them both into a war between love and blood-soaked loyalty. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain hit Chicago like punishment. Serafina Vale sprinted through the downpour, clutching a white pastry box against her chest, her sneakers slapping through puddles while cold water soaked through her bakery apron. She should have been home. Should have ignored the frantic text message from Mia begging her to take over a blind date that had apparently gone catastrophically wrong within the first 10 minutes. But Mia was her best friend since culinary school, and Serafina had never been good at saying no to people she loved. The cafe door chimed as she pushed inside, and warmth blasted across her frozen skin. She stood dripping onto the vintage tile floor, scanning the dim interior, exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from copper fixtures, leather booths tucked into shadowed corners. The kind of place that charged $18 for coffee and called it artisanal. Her phone buzzed. Mia, corner booth, far left. He's wearing all black. Good luck, I owe you forever. Serafina exhaled slowly and smoothed down her damp hair, fully aware she looked like a disaster. Flowers still dusted her knuckles. Her jeans had a chocolate stain near the knee. She smelled like vanilla extract and exhaustion. This was going to be humiliating. She crossed the cafe carefully, weaving between tables until she spotted him. The man sat alone in the furthest booth, his back to the wall like someone expecting enemies. He wore a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor, his dark hair swept back with casual precision. A newspaper lay open before him, actual printed paper, not a phone, and he didn't look up when her shadow fell across the table. Serafina cleared her throat. Nothing. She tried again, louder this time. Hi. I'm here for Mia? Still nothing. Frustration sparked through her nervousness. She'd just run 6 blocks through freezing rain for this. The least he could do was acknowledge her existence. Look, Serafina said sharply, setting the pastry box down with more force than necessary. I know this whole situation is weird, but my friend ditched you, and I'm trying to be nice, so maybe you could pretend to be a decent human being for 5 minutes. The newspaper lowered, slowly, and Serafina's breath caught in her throat. The man staring back at her was beautiful in the way dangerous things were beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved from stone, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it wasn't his face that made her pulse stutter. It was the way he looked at her, like she was the first interesting thing he'd seen in years. Sit, he said. Not a request, a command. Serafina bristled. Excuse me? You ran through a storm to be here. His voice was low, controlled, each word measured like bullets in a chamber. Sit down before you catch pneumonia and waste the effort. She should have left. Should have recognized the warning signs screaming from every inch of this man's presence, the cold authority in his tone, the way other cafe patrons carefully avoided looking in his direction, the expensive watch glinting beneath his cuff that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Instead, Serafina sat. Because beneath the ice-cold exterior, she'd caught something else in his eyes. Loneliness. I brought you something, she heard herself say, pushing the pastry box across the table. Mia mentioned you like sweets. These are lemon lavender shortbread cookies. I made them this afternoon. He stared at the box like it might explode. You bake, he said flatly. I own a bakery. Well, I work at one. Same difference. Serafina tucked a wet strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious under that unrelenting gaze. It's called Sugar and Spice. Terrible name, I know. The owner thinks it's charming. And you don't. I think it sounds like a stripper bar. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, not even close, but it was something, and Serafina felt an irrational surge of victory. He opened the box carefully, as if handling evidence, and lifted one cookie to examine it in the low light. Then he took a bite. His expression didn't change, but he took another bite, then another. Serafina watched, fascinated, as the terrifying man in the $1,000 suit demolished her cookie with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. When he finished, he reached for a second one. "These are exceptional," he said quietly. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Thanks. The trick is using actual lavender buds, not extract. Most people don't know the difference, but I know the difference." Their eyes met. The cafe seemed to shrink around them, sounds fading until all Serafina could hear was her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. This man looked at her like he could see straight through skin and bone into the messy, vulnerable parts she kept hidden from everyone. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming up for air after drowning. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He hesitated for the first time since she'd sat down. "Lucienne," he finally said. "Lucienne Moretti." The name meant nothing to Serafina, but something in the way he said it, like a confession, like a warning, made her shiver. "I'm Serafina Vale." She smiled despite the tension crackling between them. "So, Lucienne Moretti, what do you do for a living that lets you afford newspapers in the year 2024? "I run a family business." "What kind of business?" "The complicated kind." That's not an answer. "It's the only answer you're getting tonight." Serafina leaned back, studying him. Most men she'd met either talked endlessly about themselves or treated her like decoration. Lucien Moretti did neither. He watched her with absolute focus, as if memorizing every detail. The flowers still dusting her knuckles, the nervous way she twisted her ring, the pulse point fluttering at her throat. "You're strange," she said. "So are you." "I'm not strange. I'm normal. You ran through a storm to save a friend from a bad date with a stranger." His dark eyes glinted. "That's not normal. That's reckless. Or loyal. Loyalty is a luxury most people can't afford." There was something bitter in his tone, something that made Serafina want to reach across the table and... what? Touch him? Comfort him? She barely knew this man. "Everyone can afford loyalty," she said instead. "You just have to choose the right people to give it to." Lucian's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he reached for another cookie, and they fell into an unexpected rhythm, Serafina talking about the bakery, her dreams of opening her own place someday, the elderly neighbor who kept insisting she needed to find a husband before her ovaries expired. Lucian listened with an intensity that should have felt uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his questions cut straight to the heart of things. "Why baking?" "Because bread doesn't lie. You either put in the work or it falls apart." "I like that honesty." "And the people who eat your bread? Most of them are good. Some are terrible. But everyone needs to eat. Even terrible people?" Serafina paused, caught off guard by the weight in his voice. "Everyone deserves basic kindness," she said carefully. "What they do with it is their choice." Something shifted in Lucien's expression, a crack in the armor she couldn't quite name. 2 hours passed like minutes. The cafe staff started stacking chairs around them, and Serafina finally glanced at her phone to discover it was past midnight. She'd been sitting in a dimly lit corner talking to a beautiful stranger for half the night, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I should go," she said reluctantly, gathering her empty pastry box. "Early shift tomorrow." Lucian stood when she did, a gesture so old-fashioned it caught her off guard, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with electricity. "Let me walk you home," he said. "It's still pouring." "I know." They stepped into the rain together, and Serafina was acutely aware of how close he walked beside her. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cold. The streets were empty, except for the occasional cab splashing through flooded gutters. "Where do you live?" Lucienne asked. "Lakeview Towers, about 4 blocks north." He went very still. "The apartment building on Michigan Avenue?" "Yeah, tiny studio on the 3rd floor. My entire kitchen is basically a hot plate in a dream." She laughed, but Lucian wasn't smiling anymore. "What?" "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Something had changed in his expression, something dark and unreadable. They walked in silence until the familiar glass and steel facade of her building appeared through the rain. Serafina turned to face him under the lobby awning, suddenly nervous again. Thank you for tonight, she said. I know it started weird, but it wasn't weird. It was definitely weird. Then it was the right kind of weird. Serafina's heart kicked against her ribs. Lucien reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. His fingers were warm despite the freezing rain, and the touch sent electricity racing down her spine. Good night, Serafina Vale, he said quietly. Then he turned and disappeared into the storm before she could respond. Serafina stood frozen under the awning, rain drumming against the glass above her head, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her. She should go inside, should forget about the mysterious man with dangerous eyes and a voice like smoke. Instead, she pulled out her phone and texted Mia. Serafina, you owe me, big time. Mia, that bad? Serafina, no. Serafina, that good. Okay. 3 days passed before Serafina saw Lucien Moretti again. 3 days of trying to focus on croissants and customer orders while her mind kept drifting back to that rain-soaked night. 3 days of telling herself she was being ridiculous. He was a stranger, probably married or dangerous or both. Definitely not someone who would remember a baker covered in flour. Then she stepped into the elevator after her shift, exhausted and covered in powdered sugar, and found him already inside. Lucien stood against the back wall wearing another immaculate suit, midnight blue this time, reading something on his phone. He looked up when she entered, and for half a second Serafina saw a genuine surprise flash across his face. You live here, he said. Not a question, a statement. 3rd floor. Serafina's pulse hammered in her throat. You? Penthouse. Of course he did. The elevator doors slid shut, trapping them in a small metal box that suddenly felt far too intimate. Serafina pressed herself against the opposite wall, hyper-aware of every breath, every tiny movement. Small world, she managed. Apparently. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. The elevator climbed slowly, too slowly, and Serafina desperately searched for something to say that wouldn't sound completely insane. Did you enjoy the cookies? Brilliant. So smooth. Yes. Good. That's good. More silence. Then Lucien spoke again, his voice careful. I didn't know you lived in this building. Why would you? I would have... He trailed off, jaw tightening. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. Serafina could see it in the tension radiating from his body, the way his knuckles had gone white around his phone. The elevator chimed. 3rd floor. Serafina stepped out, then turned back before the doors could close. Lucien? He looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes. If you want more cookies, she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. Apartment 3C. Any time. The doors slid shut before he could respond, but not before she saw his expression shift into something that looked almost like hunger. Serafina leaned against her apartment door, heart racing. What was she doing? She didn't know this man, didn't know anything about him except that he wore expensive suits, lived in the penthouse, and looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number? It's Lucien. Mia gave me your contact information. I hope that's acceptable. Serafina stared at the message, fingers trembling slightly. Serafina, it's acceptable. Lucien. Good. Lucien. What time do you finish work tomorrow? Serafina. 6. Why? Lucien. I'll bring dinner. Serafina. You don't have to do that. Lucien. I know. She fell asleep that night with her phone clutched in her hand, smiling like an idiot at the ceiling. Tess. Lucien arrived at exactly 6 o'clock carrying bags from an Italian restaurant so exclusive Serafina had only seen it mentioned in food magazines. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look even more dangerous. This is too much, Serafina said, eyeing the containers of handmade pasta and wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. It's dinner. It's a Michelin-starred feast. Would you prefer I brought nothing? I'd prefer you didn't spend a fortune trying to impress me. Lucien set the bags down on her tiny kitchen counter and turned to face her fully. What if I told you I'm not trying to impress you? Then I'd call you a liar. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a different man. Fair. They ate sitting on her apartment floor because her table only had one chair, sharing pasta straight from the containers while Jazz played softly from her phone. Serafina told stories about disastrous baking experiments and customers who demanded gluten-free, sugar-free, taste-free wedding cakes. Lucian listened with that same intense focus, occasionally asking questions that revealed he actually understood food at a level most people didn't. "Where did you learn about cooking?" Serafina asked, twirling pasta around her fork. "My mother." The way he said it, past tense wrapped in old pain, made Serafina's chest tighten. "She taught you?" "Before she died. Yes." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." But time didn't heal everything. Serafina knew that instinctively, the way she knew when bread needed 5 more minutes or when cream was about to split. "What was her specialty?" she asked softly. Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, lemon ricotta cake. She made it every Sunday. Sounds beautiful. It was. They finished eating in comfortable silence, and Serafina found herself studying him, the way shadows pooled in the hollow of his throat, the barely visible scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the expensive watch that looked out of place in her shabby apartment. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask." "What do you really do, Lucian?" His entire body went rigid. "I told you, family business." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you." Serafina set down her fork. "Why?" "Because the truth would make you leave. You don't know that." "Yes," Lucian said quietly, his dark eyes boring into hers. "I do." Something cold slithered down Serafina's spine, not fear exactly, but recognition. This man carried violence in his bones. She could see it now in the way he positioned himself between her and the door, the way his gaze constantly tracked movement beyond the window, the way he touched everything like it might betray him. She should have been terrified. Instead, she leaned closer. "Try me." Lucien's control cracked. He moved faster than she expected, closing the distance between them until his hand cupped her jaw with devastating gentleness. "You don't want this," he said, his voice rough. "You don't want me. Stop telling me what I want." "Serafina." She kissed him. The world exploded into heat and desperation, and the taste of wine on his tongue. Lucien made a sound low in his throat, surprise or surrender, she couldn't tell. And then he was kissing her back with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss, and Serafina felt herself melting against him. This was insane. She barely knew him, but her body didn't care about logic, and neither did the part of her soul that had recognized something broken and beautiful in Lucien Moretti from the moment he'd looked up from his newspaper. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien pressed his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "Probably. I'll hurt you." "Maybe." "Then why?" "Because I don't think you want to," Serafina said simply. "And that matters." Lucian pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw war, desire fighting control, hope battling certainty. "I should go," he said. "Okay." But neither of them moved. The jazz played on. Rain started drumming against the windows. And in her tiny apartment that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, Serafina Vale held the gaze of the most dangerous man she'd ever met and didn't look away. After that night, everything changed. Lucien started appearing in unexpected places. The lobby when she came home from work, the elevator at odd hours, the coffee shop across from her building. He never explained, never apologized for the frequency of their encounters. He just showed up. And every time, Serafina felt her defenses crumbling a little more. They fell into a pattern that felt both inevitable and impossible. Late-night conversations in the hallway outside her apartment when neither could sleep. Shared dinners that turned into shared silences. Moments when Lucien would reach for her hand and then stop himself, jaw tight with restraint. Serafina began leaving things for him. Handwritten notes tucked into the mailbox for the penthouse. Cookies wrapped in brown paper. A small potted basil plant because he'd mentioned his mother used to grow herbs. He responded with midnight deliveries of expensive espresso beans, fresh flowers that appeared at her door without explanation. a vintage jazz record that must have cost a fortune. They were courting each other in secret, and Serafina knew it was dangerous. She also couldn't stop. "You're glowing," her coworker Jasmine said one afternoon, eyeing Serafina suspiciously over a tray of cooling scones. "What's his name?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Girl, please. You've been smiling at bread dough for 3 days straight. Spill." Serafina bit her lip, then admitted quietly, "Lucien." "And?" "And nothing. We're just, I don't know what we are." "Does he make you happy?" "Yes." "Does he scare you?" Serafina paused. "Sometimes." "Good scared or bad scared?" That was the question, wasn't it? "I don't know yet," Serafina said honestly. That night, she decided to bake something special. Lemon ricotta cake, the kind Lucien's mother used to make. She worked from memory of dishes she'd tasted in Italy, adjusting ratios and textures until the apartment smelled like citrus and sweetness. When she knocked on the penthouse door carrying the finished cake, Lucien answered wearing sweatpants and an expression of genuine surprise. "Hi," Serafina said, suddenly nervous. "I made something for you." He stared at the cake like it was a weapon. "It's lemon ricotta," she continued quickly. "I know it's probably not as good as your mother's, but I thought, come inside." The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, modern furniture in shades of black and gray, expensive art on the walls. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked lonely. Lucien led her to the kitchen, all black marble and stainless steel, and carefully took the cake from her hands. He cut 2 slices with surgical precision, plated them, and handed one to Serafina. They ate standing up. Serafina watched his face, trying to read his reaction, but Lucien's expression remained carefully neutral until he swallowed the first bite. Then his eyes closed. "It's perfect," he said roughly. Relief flooded through her. "Really? My mother would have loved you." The words hit Serafina square in the chest. She set down her plate and crossed to him, rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his jaw. Lucien's hands came up to grip her waist, holding her in place as he turned his head to capture her mouth properly. This kiss was different from the first, slower, deeper, weighted with something that felt dangerously close to love. When they broke apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said. Serafina's heart stuttered. "Okay." "My family business?" His phone rang. Lucien's entire body went tense. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw there made his jaw clench. "I have to take this." "Now?" "Yes." He stepped away, phone already at his ear, and Serafina watched his expression transform into something cold and terrifying. The man who'd just been holding her vanished, replaced by someone who spoke in clipped commands about shipments and territories and problems that needed to be eliminated. Her blood ran cold. Lucien finished the call and turned back to find her staring. "Serafina." "What kind of family business, Lucien?" He said nothing. "Tell me the truth." "You should go." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting tonight." Anger flared hot in Serafina's chest. "Don't do that. Don't shut me out after—" "After what? After you baked me a cake?" Lucien's voice turned sharp, dangerous. "That doesn't give you the right to my secrets." The words landed like a slap. Serafina grabbed her coat with shaking hands. "You're right. It doesn't. My mistake." She made it to the elevator before Lucien caught up with her, his hand catching the door before it could close. "Wait." "Why should I?" "Because I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me." The words echoed in the marble hallway. Serafina stared at him. This beautiful broken man who looked at her like salvation and spoke like damnation. "I don't need protection," she said quietly. "I need honesty." "I can't give you that." "Then we have nothing." The elevator doors closed between them, and Serafina didn't let herself cry until she was safely back in her apartment with the door locked and the city glittering coldly beyond her window. Her phone buzzed an hour later. "Lucien, I'm sorry." She deleted the message without responding. A week passed in painful silence. Serafina threw herself into work, creating elaborate pastries she didn't taste and serving customers she didn't see. At night, she avoided the elevator and took the stairs, terrified of running into Lucien and equally terrified she wouldn't. Then Jasmine showed her the blog post. "Girl," her coworker said, shoving a phone in Serafina's face, "is this you?" The blog was called Sweet Encounters in the City, run by an amateur food photographer who documented interesting people eating at Chicago cafes. The post featured a blurry photo of a man in an expensive suit eating a cookie with intense concentration. The caption read, "Mr. Lemonface strikes again. This gorgeous mystery man has been spotted at 3 different bakeries this month, and his expressions while eating pastries are absolutely killing me. Who hurt you, sir? Was it the lemon curd?" Serafina's stomach dropped. The photo wasn't clear, but she recognized the sharp line of Lucien's jaw, the elegant cut of his suit, the way he held the cookie like something precious. And visible in the reflection of the cafe window behind him was a briefcase with an engraved family crest she hadn't noticed that night. The comments section was exploding. User Chicago Foodie 23. "OMG, I know that crest. That's the Moretti family." User Crime Watch Daily. "Holy shit, that's Lucien Moretti, the Lucien Moretti." User Anonymous. "Run, Cookie Man, the Mafia boss has found you." User City Girl. Magic. "Wait, is this the same guy from that charity gala last year? The one whose date mysteriously disappeared after she was seen talking to his ex?" Serafina read the comments with growing horror, her hands going numb. Mafia boss. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. Except suddenly everything did. The expensive suits, the dangerous edge, the way other people avoided looking at him directly, the phone call about eliminations and territories. The violence she'd sensed in his bones wasn't metaphorical. It was real. Her phone rang. Lucien's name flashed across the screen. Serafina answered with shaking hands. "Is it true?" Silence. Then, roughly, "Yes." The world tilted sideways. "You're a... Don't say it over the phone. You're a criminal. Serafina, where are you right now?" "At work. Why?" "Stay there. I'm sending someone to..." "No." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "Don't send anyone. Don't come near me. Don't... You need protection." "From what?" "From the people who just saw that blog post and now know I care about you." The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like a death sentence. "I can't do this," Serafina whispered. "I know. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. But let me keep you safe while..." She hung up. Then she walked into the bakery's bathroom, locked the door, and finally let herself fall apart. For 3 days, Serafina existed in a fog of confusion and fear. The blog post went viral. Overnight, the mysterious mafia boss eating cookies became internet legend. Memes appeared. Fan theories exploded across social media. Amateur investigators started piecing together every public appearance Lucien Moretti had ever made. And somehow, impossibly, they traced his recent cafe visits back to her. Sweet Encounters. Update. Mystery solved. Mr. Lemonface has a girlfriend and she's a baker. Someone get me tissues. This is the cutest mob romance ever. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, food bloggers, even a production company asking about reality show rights. Serafina turned off her phone and hid. On the 4th day, she found a package outside her apartment door. Inside was a single item, the vintage jazz record Lucien had given her weeks ago, now broken cleanly in half. The note attached said, "For your own protection, stay away from my son. Mr. Moretti." Serafina stared at the shattered record, something cold and furious crystallizing in her chest. She'd been afraid. Now she was angry. She stormed up to the penthouse and pounded on the door until Lucien answered, his expression a careful mask. "Who broke into my building?" she demanded. "My head of security." "On whose orders?" "Mine." "Why?" "Because my mother wanted to send a message, and I refused to let her do it in person." Serafina held up the broken record. "This is your idea of protection? It's better than what she wanted to do." "Which was what exactly?" Lucien's jaw worked. "You don't want to know. Stop deciding what I want." Serafina threw the record pieces at his feet. "I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be locked away and protected. If your family is dangerous, tell me. If this is impossible, tell me. But stop lying and call it love. I never said I loved you. The words struck like bullets. Serafina felt something inside her crack apart. Right, my mistake. Again. She turned to leave. Lucian caught her wrist, spinning her back around with enough force to steal her breath. His control was gone, his dark eyes blazing with something wild and desperate. I didn't say it because once I do, there's no going back, he said, his voice raw. Once I tell you I'm in love with you, every enemy I have will know exactly how to destroy me. They'll come after you. They'll hurt you just to watch me break. And I can't. His voice cracked. I can't let that happen. Serafina stared at him, this terrifying man who commanded fear from everyone except her, who looked at her like she was both salvation and doom. Then let me go, she whispered. I can't do that either. Why not? Because you're the only good thing in my life, and I'm too selfish to lose you even though I should. They stood frozen in his doorway, the city glittering behind them, the weight of impossible choices pressing down like gravity. Serafina reached up slowly and cupped his face in her flour-dusted hands. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family, she said quietly. I'm asking you to let me choose you knowing exactly what that means. Lucian closed his eyes. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. If you stay, you become a target. If you stay, you'll see things that will change how you look at me. If I stay, Serafina interrupted, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. I stay because I want to. Not because you forced me. Not because I didn't understand, because I chose you. Isn't that worth something? Lucian's hands came up to cover hers, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. It's worth everything, he said hoarsely, and that's why I'm terrified. They stood together in the threshold, neither inside nor outside, suspended in the space between safety and love. Then Lucian's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Answer it, Serafina said softly. No. Lucien. The phone rang a third time, and this time Lucien pulled back with a curse, checking the screen. Whatever he saw there made every muscle in his body go taut. I have to go, he said. Where? Family business. The illegal kind? His silence was answer enough. Serafina stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. When will you be back? I don't know. Will you be safe? Lucian looked at her with something that might have been tenderness on a different man's face. Probably not. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate and full of unspoken apologies, before disappearing into the elevator without looking back. Serafina stood alone in the empty hallway, her lips still tingling, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd just chosen to fall in love with a mafia boss, and she had absolutely no idea if either of them would survive it. Serafina didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, while her phone buzzed with notifications she refused to check. Outside her window, Chicago glittered with indifferent beauty. Thousands of lives unfolding in apartments stacked like boxes, none of them aware that hers had just detonated. She'd fallen in love with a monster, or a man, or something in between. The distinction felt important, but at 3 a.m, with Lucien's taste still on her lips and fear coiled tight in her stomach, Serafina couldn't figure out which truth she believed. Her phone lit up again. Mia, call me right now. Mia, the internet is losing it over you and mob boss Cookie Man. Mia, Sarah, I'm freaking out. Are you safe? Serafina typed back with numb fingers. Serafina, I'm fine, just tired. Mia, liar, I'm coming over. Serafina, don't, please, I need to think. Mia, thinking alone is how people make terrible decisions. Serafina, then maybe I'm about to make one. She turned off her phone before Mia could respond and rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket over her head like armor that wouldn't protect her from anything. Dawn came too fast and too slow. Serafina dragged herself to the bakery at 5 a.m., moving on autopilot through the familiar rhythm of weighing flour and kneading dough. Her hands knew what to do even when her brain felt like static. She shaped croissants with mechanical precision, watching butter layers fold and refold under her palms while her thoughts spiraled elsewhere. Lucien hadn't called, hadn't texted. He'd kissed her like drowning and then vanished into whatever darkness his family business demanded, leaving her with nothing but questions and the memory of his voice saying, "I'm in love with you," like a confession at gunpoint. "You look like hell," Jasmine said, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. Serafina accepted one gratefully. "Thanks. That's not a compliment." "I know." Jasmine leaned against the counter, studying her with the kind of frank assessment that made Serafina want to hide. "So, Mafia boss. Thoughts?" "I don't want to talk about it." "Too bad. You're my friend, and you're clearly spiraling." Jasmine took a long sip of coffee. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Do you love him?" The question landed like a punch. Serafina set down the croissant she'd been shaping, her hands trembling slightly. "I barely know him." "That's not what I asked. It's complicated." "Love usually is." "Not like this," Serafina's voice cracked. "Normal people don't fall in love with criminals. Normal people don't stand in hallways at midnight choosing between safety and someone who might get them killed." "Maybe you're not normal." "That's not helpful." "I'm not trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be honest." Jasmine set down her coffee and crossed her arms. "Look, I don't know anything about the Mafia or whatever the hell Lucien Moretti does when he's not eating your cookies. But I know you. And the Serafina I know doesn't run from hard things. She runs toward them with flour on her hands and hope in her stupid, beautiful heart." Tears burned behind Serafina's eyes. "What if that gets me hurt?" "Then it gets you hurt. But at least you'll know you tried." The bakery phone rang before Serafina could respond. Jasmine answered it, her expression shifting from casual to concerned in the space of a heartbeat. "It's for you," she said quietly, holding out the receiver. "Someone named Marco." Serafina's blood went cold. She took the phone with shaking hands. "Hello? Miss Vale." The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, and utterly terrifying. "My name is Marco DeLuca. I'm Mr. Moretti's head of security. He asked me to check on your well-being." "I'm fine." "I'm glad to hear it. However, given recent developments, Mr. Moretti would prefer if you accepted protection during business hours." "I don't need protection." "With respect, Miss Vale, you're not qualified to make that assessment." Anger flared hot in Serafina's chest. "I don't care what Lucien told you to do. I'm not some damsel who needs armed guards following her around." "Mr. Moretti anticipated your response. He asked me to tell you that his enemies don't care about your independence. They only care about hurting him through you." The words hit like ice water. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Marco's voice softened slightly. "Miss Vale, I've worked for the Moretti family for 15 years. I've seen what happens to people who get close to Lucien without protection. Please don't make my job harder by becoming another casualty." Serafina closed her eyes. "Where is he?" "I'm not at liberty to say." "Is he safe?" A pause. Then, carefully, "He's handling a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind that requires his personal attention." Which meant dangerous, which meant violent, which meant Lucien was somewhere doing things that would probably haunt her nightmares if she knew the details. "Fine," Serafina said quietly. "Send your people, but they stay outside. I won't have armed men scaring my customers." "Understood. Thank you, Miss Vale." The line went dead. Serafina handed the phone back to Jasmine, who was watching her with undisguised worry. "So," Jasmine said, "still think it's not that complicated?" The protection arrived 20 minutes later in the form of 2 men wearing expensive suits and blank expressions. They positioned themselves outside the bakery entrance like statues, and Serafina tried very hard to pretend they didn't exist. It didn't work. Customers noticed immediately. Sales dropped. People whispered and stared and took photos on their phones that would probably end up on the same gossip blogs currently dissecting her relationship with Lucien. By noon, Serafina wanted to scream. By 2 p.m., she actually did. Not at the customers or the guards, but at the industrial mixer that chose that exact moment to break down, spewing cake batter across the floor in a sticky explosion that felt like a perfect metaphor for her entire life. "Fuck," she said with feeling, staring at the mess. Jasmine appeared with a mop. "Want me to call someone? To fix the mixer or my life?" "Either. Both." Serafina laughed, but it came out closer to a sob. She pressed her palms against the counter, breathing hard, trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. Her phone buzzed. Lucienne, I heard about the guards. I'm sorry. Relief and anger warred in her chest. Serafina, you couldn't call me yourself? Lucienne, I'm in a meeting. Serafina, a meeting or a situation? Lucienne, does it matter? Serafina, yes. It means one is business and one is violence. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared 3 times before his response came through. Lucienne, violence. Serafina's hands went numb. Serafina, are you hurt? Lucian, no. Serafina, did you hurt someone else? No response. Serafina stared at her phone, nausea rising in her throat. This was real. This wasn't some romantic fantasy where the dangerous man stayed dangerous only on paper. Lucian was somewhere right now possibly covered in blood, and he'd texted her between whatever horrors his life demanded like it was normal. Because for him, it was normal. Serafina, I can't do this. She sent the message before she could stop herself. The response came immediately. Lucienne, I know. Lucian, I'll have Marco remove the guards. Lucian, I'm sorry, Serafina. That was it. No fighting, no begging, just acceptance that felt worse than any argument. Serafina locked herself in the bathroom and cried until her eyes burned and her chest ached and she had nothing left inside except exhaustion. When she emerged 20 minutes later, Jasmine took one look at her face and made an executive decision. You're going home. I have 3 more hours. I don't care. Go home, take a bath, drink wine, watch something stupid on Netflix. I'll handle the rest of the shift. That wasn't a suggestion. Serafina was too tired to argue. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside, surprised to find the guards already gone. Marco worked fast, or maybe Lucien had given the order the second she'd texted. The thought made her chest constrict. She walked home through cold October wind, her mind replaying every conversation, every touch, every moment that had led her to this impossible place. Chicago moved around her, businessmen rushing to meetings, mothers pushing strollers, students laughing outside coffee shops. And Serafina felt separate from all of it, like she'd crossed into a different world where normal rules didn't apply. The lobby of her building was empty except for the doorman, who nodded politely as she passed. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, not trusting herself to stay calm if she accidentally ran into Lucien. Her apartment felt too quiet. Serafina dropped her bag by the door and stood in the middle of her tiny kitchen, surrounded by the life she'd built. Secondhand furniture, mismatched dishes, walls covered in recipes torn from magazines and photos of friends. It was small and imperfect and safe. And suddenly it felt like a cage. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Viviana De Luca. We should talk. Serafina stared in the message, her pulse kicking up. She didn't recognize the name, but instinct told her this was important. Serafina. Who are you? Viviana. Someone who knows Lucien better than you do. Coffee tomorrow? 10 a.m. at Bellissimo on State Street. Serafina. Why should I trust you? Viviana. Because I'm the only person in this city who will tell you the truth about the man you're in love with. Serafina's finger hovered over the delete button. Then she typed, fine. 10 a.m. Tapata. Bellissimo was the kind of cafe that catered to Chicago's elite. Marble countertops, velvet chairs, espresso that cost more than most people's lunch. Serafina felt out of place the moment she walked in wearing jeans and her bakery jacket. But she forced herself forward until she spotted the woman waiting at a corner table. Viviana De Luca looked like she'd been designed by committee to intimidate other women. Dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, flawless makeup, designer clothes that probably cost more than Serafina's monthly rent. She smiled when Serafina approached, but it didn't reach her eyes. Serafina Vale, Viviana said, her voice carrying a faint Italian accent. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. But curiosity won. Viviana gestured to the empty chair. Please, sit. Serafina sat, her defenses already rising. What do you want? To help you. I don't need help. Everyone needs help when they're involved with a Moretti. Viviana signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly with 2 espressos. Especially someone as inexperienced as you. The condescension in her tone made Serafina's jaw tighten. Get to the point. Fine. Lucien is using you. Excuse me? Not intentionally, perhaps, but the result is the same. Viviana sipped her espresso with practiced elegance. You're new, different, a distraction from the pressures of his position, but eventually the novelty will wear off and you'll be left with a man who can't separate business from violence. You don't know him. I know him better than anyone. Viviana set down her cup. We were together for 3 years. I know how he thinks, how he operates, how he destroys things he loves because he doesn't know how to protect them any other way. Serafina's stomach twisted. If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to save you from making the same mistakes I did. Viviana leaned forward, her expression softening into something that might have been genuine concern. Lucien Moretti is a good man trapped in a terrible life, but that doesn't change the fact that his life will consume you if you let it. I've seen it happen to others. I won't watch it happen to you. Why do you care what happens to me? Because I don't want more blood on Lucien's conscience. He carries enough guilt already. The words hung in the air between them. Serafina wanted to argue, to defend Lucien, to tell this perfect stranger that she was wrong about everything. But doubt had already taken root, fed by all the unanswered questions and secrets Lucien kept locked behind his eyes. What happened between you two? Serafina asked quietly. Viviana's smile turned sad. I wanted him to choose me over the family. He couldn't, or wouldn't. The distinction stopped mattering after a while. So you left. He left first, emotionally. I just made it official. Serafina traced the rim of her espresso cup, her mind racing. What do you think I should do? End it now, before you're in too deep to walk away. And if I'm already in too deep? Viviana studied her for a long moment. Then prepare yourself for war, because the Moretti family doesn't forgive outsiders who get too close to their heir. His mother already sent me a warning. Maria Moretti is the least of your problems. Viviana's voice dropped. There are people in this city who would kill you just to watch Lucien suffer. Others who would use you as leverage to force his hand in business deals. You're not just his girlfriend anymore. You're a weapon pointed at his heart. Cold fear slithered down Serafina's spine. He said he'd keep me safe. And how do you think that protection works? Viviana's eyes hardened. Guards following you everywhere. Your movements tracked. Your friends investigated. Your entire life scrutinized for potential threats. Is that the future you want? No. But Serafina didn't say it out loud. Viviana stood, smoothing down her designer skirt. I've said what I came to say. What you do with the information is your choice. Just remember, loving Lucien Moretti means accepting that you'll always come second to his empire. Always. She walked away before Serafina could respond, leaving her alone with cold espresso and colder truths. Serafina went to work in a daze. She measured ingredients without tasting them, decorated cakes without seeing them, smiled at customers without meaning it. Jasmine watched her with worried eyes, but didn't push, which Serafina appreciated more than words could express. By closing time, she'd made a decision. She needed to see Lucien, needed to hear the truth from him instead of secondhand through beautiful ex-lovers who probably had their own agendas. She took the elevator to the penthouse, her heart hammering against her ribs with every floor that passed. When the doors opened, she stepped into the private hallway and knocked before courage could abandon her. Lucien answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, jaw tight with tension, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. A fresh cut marked his cheekbone, and Serafina's stomach dropped at the sight of it. You're hurt, she said. It's nothing. That's not nothing. Lucien stepped back, letting her inside. What are you doing here, Serafina? I met Viviana De Luca today. His entire body went rigid. What did she tell you? That loving you means always coming second to your empire. She's not wrong. The admission hurt worse than lies would have. Serafina crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. Is that true? Will I always be an afterthought between your business deals and family obligations? Yes? Then why did you let this happen? Because I'm selfish. Lucien's voice was rough with exhaustion and something that sounded like self-loathing. Because you walked into that cafe covered in flour and honest hope, And I wanted that warmth more than I wanted to do the right thing. Which was what? Staying away from me? Yes. Too late for that now. I know. Lucien moved closer, his dark eyes searching her face like he was memorizing it. I told you this was a mistake. I told you I'd hurt you. You haven't hurt me yet. Then I'm about to. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, holding it out to her. There's a certified check inside for $50,000. Enough to open your own bakery anywhere in the country. Anywhere but Chicago. Serafina stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You're paying me to leave? I'm giving you the means to build the life you deserve. Away from me. Away from this. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. No. Serafina. No! She slapped the envelope out of his hand, fury rising hot and fast in her chest. You don't get to decide what I deserve. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone has to make it, because you clearly won't. Because I love you! The words exploded between them. Serafina's hands flew to her mouth, but it was too late. The truth was out, raw and bleeding and impossible to take back. Lucien's expression cracked open. Don't, he said hoarsely. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it makes everything worse. How could this possibly be worse? Because now I can't let you go. Lucien's control shattered completely. Because now every time I try to do the right thing and push you away, I'll remember that you love me despite knowing exactly what I am. And that will destroy us both. Serafina stepped closer, her heart breaking and rebuilding with every breath. Then maybe destruction is what we need. Maybe we need to burn down all these walls and rules and see what's left standing. What's left will be blood and ashes. Or maybe it'll be us. They stood frozen, inches apart, the weight of impossible choices pressing down like gravity. Then Lucien's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Answer it, Serafina whispered. No. Lucien. The phone rang a third time, and Lucien cursed viciously before checking the screen. Whatever he saw there made all the color drain from his face. I have to go, he said. Where? Family emergency. What kind of emergency? The kind that can't wait. He grabbed his jacket, his movement sharp with barely controlled panic. Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse until I come back. I'm not staying here. Serafina, please, tell me what's happening. Lucien's jaw worked. My mother is hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. She's made it very clear that I'm expected to attend, with a date. So take me. Absolutely not. Why? Because she'll destroy you. I can handle your mother. No, Lucien said quietly, his eyes dark with something that looked like fear. You can't. No one can. He kissed her forehead, quick and desperate, before disappearing into the elevator, leaving Serafina alone in his vast penthouse, with silence and questions and the terrible certainty that everything was about to change. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of anxiety and determination. Serafina went home, showered, and then did something stupid. She called Mia. I need a dress, she said when her friend answered. Something that says I belong at a Mafia charity gala. Are you insane? Probably. Sarah, please, Mia. I need to do this. There was a long pause. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Bring your credit card and your courage, because you're going to need both. They spent the afternoon ransacking boutiques until Serafina found it, a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves without being obvious, elegant without trying too hard. It cost more than she'd ever spent on clothing in her life, and she bought it anyway. You're really doing this, Mia said, watching her friend study her reflection. I have to. Why? Because if I don't show up, Lucien wins. His mother wins. Everyone who thinks I don't belong in his world wins. Serafina met Mia's eyes in the mirror. And I'm tired of losing. What if they're right? What if you don't belong? Then I'll find out tomorrow night. But at least I'll know I tried. Mia hugged her fiercely. You're either the bravest person I know or the dumbest. I can't decide which. Both, definitely both. That night, Serafina laid the dress out on her bed and stared at it for hours. terror and determination warring in her chest. Lucian hadn't called, hadn't texted. She told herself he was busy with family obligations and not deliberately shutting her out. She wasn't sure she believed it. At midnight, she finally texted him. Serafina, I'm coming to the gala tomorrow. The response came 20 minutes later. Lucien, don't. Serafina, too late. I already bought a dress. Lucien. Serafina, this is a mistake. Serafina, then it's my mistake to make. Lucien, you don't understand what you're walking into. Serafina, so help me understand, or let me figure it out myself. No response. Serafina turned off her phone and tried to sleep, but anxiety kept her awake until dawn painted her windows gold. When her alarm finally rang, she rose like a soldier preparing for battle. The Moretti Charity Gala was held at the Drake Hotel, a monument to old Chicago money and power. Serafina arrived alone in a cab, clutching a small purse and her rapidly diminishing courage. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, depositing women in designer gowns and men in tuxedos that probably cost more than her car. She didn't belong here. Everyone could see it. But Serafina lifted her chin and walked through the gilded doors anyway, following the sound of classical music and expensive laughter to the ballroom. It was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across marble floors. Ice sculptures melted slowly beside champagne fountains. Women glittered with diamonds, and men moved with the casual confidence of people who'd never worried about money in their entire lives. Serafina searched the crowd for Lucien and found him immediately. He stood near the far wall surrounded by men in expensive suits, his expression carefully neutral as he listened to something an older gentleman was saying. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, all sharp lines and controlled power, and Serafina's heart clenched at the sight of him. Then a woman touched his arm. Viviana De Luca. She looked even more perfect than she had at the cafe. Emerald green dress, hair swept into an elegant updo, diamonds at her throat that caught the light with every movement. She leaned close to Lucien, saying something that made him nod, and jealousy seared through Serafina's chest like acid. She started forward before thinking better of it. Halfway across the ballroom, a hand caught her elbow. And who might you be? Serafina turned to find an elegant older woman studying her with shrewd eyes. She wore black like armor, her silver hair swept back from a face that had probably been beautiful once and was now just terrifying. I'm Serafina Vale, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes. Ah, the baker. You must be Lucien's mother, Maria Moretti. She didn't offer her hand. I'm surprised to see you here. My son indicated you wouldn't be attending. Plans changed. How unfortunate. Maria's smile was ice wrapped in silk. Tell me, Miss Vale, what exactly do you think you're doing? I'm sorry? My son has responsibilities, obligations, a position to maintain. Maria's voice dropped. He doesn't have time for distractions, especially not ones that smell like vanilla and think love conquers all. Heat rushed to Serafina's cheeks. I'm not a distraction. Then what are you? Someone who cares about him. How sweet! How naive! Maria's eyes hardened. Let me be clear, Miss Vale. Lucien will marry within our world. Someone who understands the life. Someone who can help build the empire, not weaken it with sentiment and flower-covered hands. You are a phase. Nothing more. The words hit like physical blows. Serafina opened her mouth to respond, but Maria had already turned away, gliding across the ballroom to join a cluster of equally terrifying women who looked at Serafina like she was something they'd scraped off their designer shoes. She stood frozen, humiliation burning through her veins. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here. She needed to leave before she made this worse. But then Lucien saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Serafina watched his expression shift from neutral to horrified in the space of a heartbeat. He said something sharp to the men surrounding him and started toward her, but Viviana caught his arm, pulling him back. Whatever she said made him stop. And in that moment, watching Lucien choose between crossing the ballroom to her or staying with the elegant ex-lover who belonged in his world, Serafina felt something inside her break. He stayed. The most feared mafia boss on the East Coast stayed where it was safe and polite and expected. while the woman he claimed to love stood alone across the room, drowning in humiliation. Serafina turned and walked toward the exit before tears could betray her. She made it to the lobby before Lucien caught up. "Serafina, wait!" She spun to face him, fury and heartbreak warring in her chest. "You didn't come to me. I was handling— I don't care what you were handling. Your mother just told me I'm a phase, that I'll never belong in your world. And you stood there doing nothing while the woman you used to sleep with held your arm like she owned you." Lucien's jaw clenched. "Viviana means nothing to me." "Then why did you let her stop you?" "Because I was trying to prevent a scene." "Well, congratulations, you succeeded. No scene. Just me realizing I'm not worth fighting for in front of your family." "That's not true, isn't it?" Serafina's voice cracked. "You told me you loved me. You told me I was the only good thing in your life. But the second we're in public, the second your world is watching, I become invisible. I'm trying to protect you. By humiliating me? By keeping you separate from the violence." Lucien's control shattered. "Do you have any idea what these people would do if they knew how much you mean to me? They'd use you, hurt you, turn you into a weapon against me. So instead, you making me nothing. That's your solution?" "Yes!" The word echoed in the marble lobby. Serafina stared at him, this beautiful, broken man who loved her enough to hurt her, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. "I deserve better than this," she said quietly. Lucien's expression crumbled. "I know." "Then let me go." "I can't." "You have to." She turned toward the door. "Serafina." "Goodbye, Lucien." This time, he didn't follow. Serafina walked out into cold Chicago night, her expensive dress whispering against her legs, her heart splintering into pieces too small to ever put back together. She made it 2 blocks before the tears came. And when they did, she let them fall unchecked while the city moved around her, indifferent, eternal, beautiful in its cruelty. Just like the man she'd been foolish enough to love. Serafina woke up 3 days later and realized she'd stopped crying. The apartment felt different in the silence. Smaller somehow, like grief had compressed the walls until there was barely room to breathe. Empty coffee cups littered the counter. Her phone sat face down on the nightstand where she'd thrown it after blocking Lucien's number. Outside her window, Chicago moved on without her, indifferent to the way her world had collapsed. She dragged herself to the shower and stood under scalding water until her skin turned red, trying to wash away the memory of Lucien's hands on her waist, his mouth against hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was salvation. It didn't work. Nothing worked. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel with her hair dripping down her back, she found 17 missed calls from Jasmine and a text from the bakery owner saying to take all the time she needed, which meant Jasmine had told him everything. Serafina almost called her friend back, almost reached for the phone and let someone else carry this weight for a while. But her hand stopped halfway there, frozen by the certainty that talking about it would make it real in a way she couldn't survive yet. So instead she got dressed, braided her wet hair, and went to work. The bakery was quiet when she arrived. Just the hum of ovens and Jasmine kneading dough at the center table. Her friend looked up when the door chimed, her expression shifting from surprise to fierce protectiveness in half a second. "You should be home," Jasmine said. "I need to work." Please," Serafina's voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I need normal, just for a few hours, please." Jasmine studied her for a long moment, then nodded and went back to kneading without another word. They worked in companionable silence for 3 hours, falling into the familiar rhythm of weighing flour and shaping dough. Serafina focused on her hands, the stretch of gluten beneath her palms, the precise fold of croissant layers, the way sugar dissolved into butter when you worked it just right. She didn't think about Lucien. She didn't think about the gala. She didn't think about how Maria Moretti's words had carved her open and left her bleeding on marble floors, while the man she loved chose silence over defending her. She just baked. At noon, the bell above the door chimed. Serafina looked up from the tart shells she was filling and felt her entire body go cold. Viviana De Luca stood in the doorway wearing a cream-colored coat and an expression of genuine concern that looked wrong on her perfect face. "Miss Vale," she said quietly. "May I speak with you?" "No?" "Please, it's important." "I don't care." Viviana glanced at Jasmine, who had stopped needing to glare at her with undisguised hostility. Perhaps we could talk privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Jasmine. Very well. Viviana stepped fully inside, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum. I came to apologize. For the gala. For my part in what happened. Serafina's laugh was bitter. Your part? You mean holding Lucian back while his mother eviscerated me? I was trying to prevent him from making a scene that would have put you in more danger. How noble! You don't understand the politics involved. I understand perfectly. Serafina set down the pastry bag with enough force to make Viviana flinch. You want him back. You saw an opportunity to prove I don't belong in his world, and you took it. Don't pretend this was about protecting me. Something flickered in Viviana's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You're right, she said quietly. Part of me does want him back, but that doesn't change the fact that what I told you at the cafe was true. Loving Lucien Moretti will destroy you. It already has. No, not yet. Viviana moved closer, her voice dropping. But it will if you don't understand what you're actually dealing with. Serafina crossed her arms, exhaustion making her reckless. Enlighten me. Maria Moretti runs that family with an iron fist. Lucien is her heir, her legacy, the culmination of 40 years building an empire. She will never accept you. Never. And she has the power to make your life a living hell if you continue seeing her son. I'm not seeing her son anymore. Are you certain? Because Lucien doesn't give up easily on things he wants. The words stirred something dangerous in Serafina's chest. Hope, maybe, or the memory of hope before it died. What do you want, Viviana? I want you to be smart. Viviana pulled an envelope from her coat pocket and set it on the counter between them. There's information inside. Names, dates, details about the Moretti family business that might help you understand exactly what kind of danger you've stumbled into. Serafina stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. Why would you give this to me? Because, unlike Maria, I don't believe ignorance is an adequate defense. If you're going to make a choice about Lucien, you deserve to make it with full knowledge of who he really is. I know who he is. Do you? Viviana's eyes were sad. Do you know about the warehouse fire in 2019 that killed 3 people? The politician who disappeared after refusing to take Moretti money? The girl who got too close to Lucien 5 years ago and ended up in the hospital with 2 broken legs? Ice flooded Serafina's veins. That's not possible. Lucien didn't do those things himself. But his family did. His empire did. And whether he pulled the trigger or just gave the order, the blood still stains his hands. Serafina felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Jasmine was there suddenly, her hand warm and steady on Serafina's shoulder. Get out. Viviana didn't move. I'm trying to help. You're trying to poison her against him. There's a difference. Am I wrong? About any of it? Jasmine's silence was answer enough. Viviana turned back to Serafina. Read the file. Then decide if loving him is worth dying for, because that's where this ends if you're not careful. She left before Serafina could respond, the bell chiming cheerfully behind her like nothing had just been destroyed. Serafina stared at the envelope on the counter. Don't open it, Jasmine said quietly. I have to. No, you don't. You can throw it away and forget this entire conversation happened. Can I? Serafina picked up the envelope with shaking hands, or will I spend the rest of my life wondering if she was telling the truth? Jasmine didn't answer. Serafina took the envelope to the back office, locked the door, and opened it with fingers that trembled so badly she almost couldn't break the seal. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs that made her stomach turn. A warehouse reduced to ash, 3 bodies recovered, a politician's campaign poster with a red X through his face, and a date of disappearance circled in black ink. Hospital records for a 22-year-old woman named Isabella Russo, fractured femur, shattered tibia, extensive internal bleeding, and underneath it all a single typed note. The Moretti family protects its own. Everyone else is expendable. Serafina read through the documents twice, her hands growing steadier even as her heart splintered into smaller and smaller pieces. This was real. The violence wasn't abstract or theoretical. It was documented, verified, stained across official reports and news articles that painted the Moretti Empire in blood. and Lucien stood at the center of it all. She sat in that locked office for 2 hours, staring at evidence of horrors committed in the name of family loyalty and business expansion, trying to reconcile the man who'd kissed her like drowning with the heir to an organization that broke bones and burned buildings when obstacles appeared. When she finally emerged, Jasmine took one look at her face and started crying. "It's all true, isn't it?" Jasmine whispered. "Yes." "What are you going to do?" Serafina folded the documents carefully and slid them back into the envelope. "I'm going to talk to him." "That's insane." "Probably. Sarah, if even half of what's in there is accurate, then I deserve to hear it from him, not from his ex-lover trying to scare me away." Serafina grabbed her coat, her movements sharp with determination. "I need to know if he knew, if he sanctioned those things or just let them happen. I need to look him in the eye and hear him tell me the truth. And if the truth is worse than you think, then at least I'll know." She left before Jasmine could argue further, the envelope clutched against her chest like evidence at a trial. The penthouse door opened before Serafina could knock. Lucien stood in the threshold looking like he hadn't slept in days, rumpled shirt, dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled in a way that would have been endearing if her heart wasn't currently being ripped apart. "Serafina," he said, and her name sounded like prayer in his mouth. "We need to talk." He stepped back immediately, letting her inside. The penthouse looked different than she remembered, colder somehow, despite the expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Or maybe she was different now, seeing it through eyes that understood what blood money could buy. "I didn't think you'd come back," Lucien said quietly. Serafina turned to face him, the envelope heavy in her hands. "I wasn't planning to. Then Viviana gave me this." She watched his expression shudder the moment he saw the envelope. "What is it?" "You tell me." Lucien took it carefully, his jaw tightening as he flipped through the contents. With each page, his face grew harder until he looked like the mafia boss everyone feared, instead of the man who'd eaten her cookies with devastating focus. When he finished, he set the envelope down on the coffee table with precise control. "Where did she get these? Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why? Because you want to know who leaked information, or because you want to confirm if it's true?" Lucien's silence was damning. Serafina felt something inside her crack wide open. "It's all real, isn't it? The warehouse fire, the disappeared politician, that girl in the hospital. It's complicated." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." Lucien's control fractured. "You want me to explain decades of family business in one conversation? Justify every decision made before I even took control? Absolve myself of sins I inherited along with this goddamn empire? I want you to tell me if you hurt people." The question hung between them like a knife. Lucien stared at her with eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. "Yes." The single word stole the air from Serafina's lungs. "How many?" "I don't know." "Guess." "I won't." "Why not?" "Because the number doesn't matter." Lucien's voice turned raw. "Whether it's 1 or 100, it still makes me the monster you're looking at me like I am right now." Serafina wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. "The girl, Isabella Russo. What happened to her?" Lucien's jaw clenched. "She was sleeping with a rival family's son, passing information." "So you broke her legs?" "My uncle did. I found out after." "And did nothing. What was I supposed to do? Turn him in? Start a war within the family?" She knew the risks when she chose betrayal. "She was 22 years old. She was a spy." They were both shouting now, the words echoing off marble and glass. Serafina pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears burning there. "I can't do this. Can't reconcile the man who makes me feel safe with someone who justifies breaking a girl's bones because she fell in love with the wrong person." "Then don't." Lucien's voice dropped to something that sounded almost like surrender. "I told you from the beginning what I was. You're the one who insisted on seeing something else." "Because I thought there was something else to see." "There isn't. There's just this. Violence and blood and choices that stain your soul until you can't remember what clean felt like." Serafina looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth she'd been avoiding since that first night in the cafe. Lucien Moretti wasn't a good man trapped in a bad situation. He was a man who'd made peace with his darkness so long ago that he couldn't remember the light. I loved you, she whispered, past tense. The words hit Lucien like a physical blow. She watched something in his expression crumble, watched the careful control he wore like armor crack apart to reveal the devastation beneath. I know, he said hoarsely. Was any of it real? All of it was real. Then how can you— Her voice broke. How can you love me and still be this person? Because loving you doesn't erase what I am. It just makes me wish I was someone different. The confession hung in the air between them. Serafina wanted to cross the room and hold him. Wanted to tell him that wishing was enough, that love could save them both from the darkness pressing in from all sides. But she'd seen the photographs, read the reports, held evidence of violence in her hands, and felt her illusions shatter like glass. I have to go, she said. Lucien didn't argue, didn't beg, just stood there looking like a man watching his last hope walk away. Serafina made it to the door before he spoke again. Serafina. She stopped but didn't turn around. If you leave now, don't come back. I can't survive losing you twice. The words were a warning and a plea and a goodbye, all wrapped into one. Serafina opened the door and stepped into the hallway without looking back, letting the heavy wood close between them with a finality that felt like death. She took the elevator down to the lobby on legs that barely held her weight. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall until she was safely home. But when the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, she found Marco waiting. Lucien's head of security looked grim. Miss Vale, I need you to come with me. I'm going home. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. Something in his tone made Serafina's blood run cold. What's going on? Marco glanced around the lobby, then lowered his voice. There's been a situation. Someone leaked information about your relationship with Mr. Moretti to a rival family. They're coming for you. What? We need to get you to a safe location immediately. Serafina's mind raced. This is insane. I just left him. I'm done with all of this. It doesn't matter if you're done. They're not. Marco's hand closed around her elbow, firm but not painful. Please, Miss Vale. We don't have time to argue. Terror flooded through her veins. This was real. The danger Lucien had warned about wasn't theoretical anymore. It was here, immediate, hunting her through the streets of Chicago because she'd been foolish enough to fall in love with the wrong man. Where are you taking me? Somewhere they can't reach you. Marco led her to a black SUV with tinted windows. Serafina climbed inside on autopilot, her brain struggling to process the sudden shift from heartbreak to mortal danger. The car pulled away from her building, and through the rear window, she watched her normal life disappear block by block. They drove for 20 minutes before Marco's phone rang. The conversation was brief, conducted in Italian too rapid for Serafina to follow, but she caught Lucien's name, and the word compromised. Marco's face went white. Change of plans, he said to the driver. What's happening? Serafina demanded. Marco turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart stop. The leak came from inside the Moretti family. What does that mean? It means someone close to Lucien set you up, and we just drove you directly into their trap. The car screeched to a halt. 3 black vehicles blocked the road ahead, and men in dark suits emerged holding weapons that gleamed under the streetlights. Serafina's scream died in her throat as her door was wrenched open and rough hands dragged her from the SUV. Marco shouted something, reaching for his gun, but a single shot rang out and he crumpled to the pavement. Serafina fought desperately, her bakery-strong hands clawing at her captors, but there were too many of them and they were too strong. A cloth pressed against her mouth and nose. Chemical sweetness flooded her lungs. The world tilted sideways, sounds growing distant and muffled. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Marco's body, lying motionless on the cold Chicago street, blood pooling beneath his head like a halo. Then nothing. What? Consciousness returned in fragments, cold concrete beneath her cheek, zip ties cutting into her wrists, the coppery taste of blood in her mouth. Serafina forced her eyes open and immediately wished she hadn't. She was in some kind of warehouse, abandoned from the look of it, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. Moonlight streamed through gaps in the roof, illuminating dust motes that danced like ghosts, and standing 10 feet away, silhouetted against that pale light, was a figure she recognized. "You're awake. Good." The voice was cultured, familiar. Viviana De Luca stepped into the light, and Serafina's world tilted on its axis. "You," Serafina croaked, her throat raw. "You did this." "I tried to warn you." Viviana crouched down, her perfect face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. "I told you loving Lucien would destroy you. You should have listened." "Why?" "Because you're leverage." Viviana reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Serafina's ear with devastating gentleness. "The Moretti Empire has enemies, powerful ones who've been waiting for exactly this opportunity." "What opportunity?" "Lucien Moretti falling in love with someone weak, someone unprotected, someone whose death would break him completely." Horror crashed over Serafina in waves. "You're working with his enemies." "I'm building a new alliance, one that doesn't include the Moretti family stranglehold on Chicago's Underworld." Viviana stood, brushing dust from her expensive coat. "Your death will be the catalyst. Lucien will retaliate against the family I'm framing for your murder. War will erupt, and in the chaos, my actual allies will dismantle the Moretti Empire piece by piece. He'll know it was you." "Will he? I've been so careful, so concerned about your well-being. I even gave you that file to protect you." Viviana's smile was poison wrapped in silk. "When your body is found, I'll be the first person at Lucien's side, helping him grieve, helping him seek revenge against the wrong people, helping him destroy himself." Serafina's mind raced through terror and pain, searching desperately for a way out. What about Marco? Dead, along with anyone else who might have interfered. "Lucien will never believe I was killed by rivals. He's too smart. He's too heartbroken. Grief makes people stupid." Viviana checked her watch. "You have about 2 hours before my associates return to finish this. I'd suggest you spend that time making peace with whatever you believe in." She walked toward the warehouse exit, her heels clicking against concrete. "Viviana." The other woman paused. "When Lucien finds out what you did," Serafina said, forcing strength into her voice despite the terror coursing through her, "he's going to kill you, slowly, and nothing you're building will save you from that." Viviana looked back over her shoulder. "Perhaps, but you won't be alive to see it." Then she was gone, leaving Serafina alone in the dark with zip ties around her wrists and 2 hours until men came to end her life. For one desperate moment, Serafina gave in to panic. She screamed until her throat was raw, thrashed against her restraints until her wrists bled, sobbed into the cold concrete while terror threatened to consume her completely. Then she stopped. Because panic wouldn't save her. Fear wouldn't save her. The only thing that might save her was the same stubborn determination that had made her run through a storm for a friend, stand up to Maria Moretti at a gala, and demand truth from a man who traded in lies. Serafina forced herself to breathe slowly, pushing past the adrenaline and terror to think. The zip ties were tight but not professionally done. Viviana's associates had been in a hurry, focused on speed over security. If Serafina could find something sharp, a piece of broken glass, a nail, anything, she might be able to cut through them. She rolled onto her side, ignoring the pain shooting through her bruised ribs, and started inching across the floor. Glass crunched beneath her shoulder. A window, broken recently from the look of the shards scattered across the concrete. Serafina wiggled toward the largest piece, her bound hands scrabbling behind her back until her fingers closed around sharp edges that immediately bit into her skin. She didn't care about the pain. She sawed desperately at the zip ties, blood making her fingers slippery, her breath coming in harsh gasps that echoed through the empty warehouse. The plastic was thick, industrial grade. It took 15 minutes of agonizing work before the first tie finally snapped. Serafina's hands came free, and she immediately rolled onto her back, gasping with relief and pain. Her wrists were bleeding, her entire body ached, but she was free. She staggered to her feet and searched the warehouse for an exit. The main doors were chained from the outside, windows too high to reach, one service door in the back corner, partially hidden behind collapsed shelving. Serafina ran toward it, praying it wasn't locked, praying she had enough time, praying to anyone who might be listening that she could survive this. The door opened. Cold October air hit her face like salvation. She stumbled outside into an alley she didn't recognize, her dress torn and bloody, her bare feet cut from broken glass, her phone and purse gone. But she was alive. She ran. Down alleys and across empty streets, her lungs burning and her vision blurring with exhaustion, running toward the only place she could think of that might offer safety. She had to warn Lucien, had to tell him about Viviana's betrayal before the trap closed around him completely. Because despite everything, the violence, the lies, the impossible gulf between their worlds, she couldn't let him walk into an ambush designed to destroy him, even if loving him had nearly killed her, even if she could never forgive what he was, even if this was the last thing she ever did. Serafina ran through the cold Chicago night, bleeding and terrified and absolutely certain of only one thing. She wasn't done fighting yet. Serafina's lungs felt like they were being shredded from the inside. She'd been running for 20 minutes through streets she barely recognized, her torn dress catching on chain-link fences and her bare feet leaving bloody prints on cold pavement. Every breath tasted like copper and exhaustion, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Behind her, somewhere in the maze of industrial buildings and abandoned warehouses, men were searching. She could hear their shouts echoing off brick walls, could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, like searchlights hunting prey. Viviana's associates had returned early, and they discovered their hostage was gone. Serafina ducked into an alley, pressing herself against the wall, while her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Blood dripped from her wrists where the zip ties had cut deep, and her feet screamed with every step, but pain was just noise now. Background static she couldn't afford to acknowledge. She needed to get to Lucien, needed to warn him before Viviana's trap closed completely. The problem was she had no phone, no money, and no idea where she actually was. The warehouse district stretched for miles in every direction, a labyrinth of identical buildings and empty streets that looked like the aftermath of industrial collapse. Footsteps approached, heavy boots on concrete. Serafina held her breath and stayed absolutely still, every muscle locked tight with terror. Two men passed the alley entrance, their voices carrying clearly in the cold night air. She can't have gone far, not in that condition. Boss wants her found in the next 15 minutes or heads start rolling. Then we split up. You take the north quadrant, I'll sweep south. They separated and Serafina waited until their footsteps faded before she moved again. She had 15 minutes, maybe less. Serafina forced herself back into motion, staying close to the buildings and using every shadow as cover. Her dancer's balance, honed through years of standing on her feet in the bakery, kept her moving despite the pain, and her mind worked frantically to piece together a plan. She needed transportation, a phone, anything. Up ahead, she spotted a 24-hour gas station bleeding fluorescent light across the empty street. It was a risk, brightly lit, exposed, probably monitored by security cameras that Viviana's people could access. But it was also civilization, people, potential help. Serafina made the decision in half a heartbeat and ran toward it. The attendant behind the bulletproof glass looked up when she stumbled inside, his eyes going wide at the sight of her. Torn designer dress, bleeding wrists, bare feet covered in cuts. Jesus Christ, lady, what happened to you? I need to use your phone. Serafina's voice came out raw and desperate. Please, it's an emergency. You need a hospital. I need a phone! The attendant stared at her for another second, then pushed an ancient landline through the gap in the security glass. You got 3 minutes before I call the cops. Thank you. Serafina grabbed the receiver with shaking hands and dialed the only number she'd memorized from all those late-night texts. Lucien's private line. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, he answered. Who is this? His voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the man who'd held her like salvation. It's me, Serafina gasped. It's Serafina. Silence. Then, with barely controlled violence, where are you? I don't know, some gas station in the warehouse district. Lucien, listen to me. Are you hurt? That doesn't matter, Viviana. Are you hurt? The command in his voice cut through her panic. Yes, but I'm okay. Lucien, Viviana is working with your enemies. She kidnapped me, set up some kind of trap to start a war, and what's the address? Lucien's voice had gone absolutely lethal. Look at the storefront. Tell me the address. Serafina craned her neck to see through the window. 2847 Industrial Boulevard. I know it. Stay inside. Don't leave that building for any reason. I'm 10 minutes out. They're looking for me. The men who took me. They're sweeping the area and— 10 minutes, Serafina. Stay alive for 10 minutes. The line went dead. Serafina handed the phone back to the attendant, who was now watching her with undisguised alarm. You in some kind of trouble? Yes. Should I call the police? No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Please, someone's coming for me. I just need to wait. The attendant looked unconvinced but nodded slowly. You can wait by the coffee machine, but if anyone dangerous shows up, I'm locking you out and calling 911. Fair enough. Serafina moved to the back of the store, positioning herself where she could see the entrance while staying partially hidden behind a display of motor oil. Her entire body vibrated with adrenaline and pain, every nerve screaming at her to run, but she forced herself to stay still. 10 minutes. She could survive 10 minutes. Outside, headlights swept across the parking lot. A black sedan pulled up to the pumps. Serafina's blood went cold as she recognized the driver, one of the men who'd been searching for her in the warehouse district. He climbed out of the car slowly, his eyes scanning the gas station with predatory focus. Then he looked directly at the window, directly at her. Their eyes met through the glass, and Serafina watched recognition flash across his face. He reached for something beneath his jacket. Serafina ran. She bolted toward the back of the store, ignoring the attendant's shout of alarm, searching desperately for a rear exit. There had to be one. Fire codes demanded it. She found the door behind a stack of cardboard boxes and slammed into it with her full weight. It burst open onto a loading dock. Behind her, the front door chimed. Footsteps followed. Serafina jumped off the loading dock and landed badly, her ankle twisting beneath her weight. Pain exploded up her leg, but she forced herself upright and kept running, limping now, her body screaming in protest. The man pursuing her was faster, professional. He closed the distance in seconds, his hand catching the back of her dress and yanking her backward with brutal force. Serafina fell hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. "Stupid bitch," the man growled, looming over her. "Should have stayed put." He reached for her again. Serafina grabbed a chunk of broken concrete from the ground and swung it with every ounce of strength she had left. It connected with his temple. The man staggered sideways, blood streaming down his face, shock and rage transforming his expression. "You're fucking dead!" A single gunshot cracked through the night. The man's head snapped back and he crumpled to the pavement like a puppet with cut strings. Serafina scrambled backward, her scream caught in her throat, staring at the body and the spreading pool of blood. And, "Don't look at him! Look at me!" Lucien. He stood 15 feet away holding a gun that still smoked in the cold air, his face carved from stone in absolute fury. Behind him, 3 black SUVs had materialized like ghosts, and armed men were pouring out in coordinated silence. Serafina couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd just watched Lucien kill someone. Watched the life drain from a man's eyes in less time than it took to blink, and Lucien's expression hadn't changed at all. He crossed to her in 3 strides and dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over her body like he was afraid she might shatter if he touched her. "Serafina, look at me." She dragged her gaze from the corpse to his face. "Are you hurt?" His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes were wild. "Did they—" "I'm okay." "You're bleeding." "I'm okay." "You're not okay. You're—" His control cracked. "Cristo, you're covered in blood, and your feet—" "Lucien." She grabbed his wrist, her fingers leaving red prints on his expensive white shirt. "Viviana is the leak. She's working with your enemies. She told me everything. She's planning to frame a rival family for my death and use it to start a war that destroys the Morettis." She watched the information process across his face, shock giving way to cold understanding, and then something that looked like murder. "Where is she?" "I don't know. She left me at the warehouse, said her associates would finish the job in 2 hours. Lucien's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Then he turned to the men behind him and said something in rapid Italian that made them scatter immediately. He turned back to Serafina and carefully, so carefully, lifted her into his arms. "What are you doing?" "Taking you somewhere safe." "Put me down. I can walk." "Your feet are shredded and you can barely stand. Don't argue with me right now." He carried her to the lead SUV and settled her in the back seat with devastating gentleness, his hands checking her injuries with professional efficiency that reminded Serafina he'd probably done this before for people hurt far worse. One of his men appeared with a medical kit. Lucian cleaned her wounds in silence, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. Every time she flinched, his hands gentled, but his expression grew darker. "I'm going to kill her," he said quietly. "Lucien, I'm going to find Viviana De Luca, and I'm going to make her beg for death before I grant it." The words should have horrified Serafina. Instead, she felt something fierce and vindictive curl in her chest. "Good." Lucien's hand stilled on the bandage he was wrapping around her wrist. Their eyes met. "You mean that," he said. "She tried to murder me. She killed Marco. She's planning to destroy your family and frame innocent people for crimes they didn't commit." Serafina's voice hardened. "So yes, I mean it." Something shifted in Lucien's expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding that the woman he'd been trying to protect had just crossed a line she could never uncross. "This is who I am," he said quietly. "This is the world you walked into. Violence and revenge and blood that never washes clean. I know. And you're still here. I'm still here." Lucien's control shattered completely. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he could physically hold her together through sheer force of will. His face pressed into her hair, and Serafina felt him shaking. "I thought I lost you," he whispered against her temple. "When Marco called and said you'd been taken, I thought—" His voice broke. Serafina held him tighter, her own tears finally breaking free. "I'm here. I'm alive. I'm here." They stayed like that for a long moment, two broken people holding each other in the back of an SUV surrounded by armed men and the body of someone Lucien had killed without hesitation. When they finally pulled apart, Lucien's expression had transformed into something absolutely terrifying. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Find out who else is involved in Viviana's network, how deep this betrayal goes." "What about me?" "You're staying with me, under guard. No arguments." "I wasn't going to argue." Lucien's phone rang. He answered it in Italian, his voice dropping into the cold command that made powerful men fear him. The conversation lasted 3 minutes, and with every second his expression grew harder. When he hung up, he looked at Serafina with eyes like black ice. "They found the warehouse where you were held, empty now, but there's evidence Viviana's been planning this for months. She's built an alliance with the Calabrese family, our oldest rivals. This isn't just about revenge. It's a coordinated attempt to dismantle everything my family has built." "Where is she now?" "Unknown. She's gone underground, but she'll surface eventually. They always do." "What are you going to do?" Lucien's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "I'm going to make her wish she'd killed me instead of coming after you." The SUV pulled up to Lucien's building, and he carried Serafina inside despite her protests. The doorman's eyes widened at the sight of them, but one look from Lucien killed any questions before they could form. They took the private elevator to the penthouse. Inside, Lucien set her down on the leather couch and immediately started making calls. Serafina watched him pace the length of the windows, his voice sharp and commanding as he coordinated with his men, called in favors, and activated a network she was only beginning to understand the scope of. This was Lucien Moretti in his element. Dangerous, powerful, absolutely terrifying. And somehow, watching him orchestrate a manhunt from his living room, Serafina felt safer than she had in days. An hour later, one of his lieutenants arrived with updates. The man, young, dressed in an expensive suit, with nervous energy that said he knew he was delivering bad news, stood in the doorway and spoke in Italian too rapid for Serafina to follow. But she caught names: Viviana, Calabrese, and another name that made Lucien go absolutely still. Maria, his mother's name. Lucien responded in a voice so cold it made the room temperature drop. The lieutenant nodded rapidly and disappeared, leaving them alone in tense silence. "What did he say?" Serafina asked quietly. Lucien turned to face her, and the expression on his face made her heart stop. "My mother knew." 3 words, a death sentence. What? Maria knew about Viviana's plan. Maybe didn't orchestrate it, but she knew. And she let it happen because she thought losing you would make me more focused on family business. Lucien's voice was absolutely devoid of emotion. She sacrificed you to strengthen my commitment to the Empire. Serafina's mind reeled. That's insane. That's loyalty according to the Moretti family code. Everything serves the Empire. Everyone is expendable except the bloodline, including me. Especially you. The truth settled between them like broken glass. What are you going to do? Serafina whispered. Lucian crossed to her and knelt, taking her bandaged hands in his. I'm going to do something I should have done the moment you walked into that cafe covered in flour and hope. What? I'm going to choose you over everything else. Serafina's breath caught. Lucien, my mother wanted me focused on the Empire? Fine. I'll give her an empire built on new rules. Viviana wanted to start a war? She'll get one, but it won't be the war she expected. His eyes burned with absolute conviction. I'm going to dismantle every alliance built on fear and betrayal. I'm going to expose everyone who thought you were acceptable collateral damage. And then I'm going to build something different. You can't watch me. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, and full of promises that tasted like gasoline waiting for a match. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Serafina cupped his face in her hands. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be at war with your own family. I've been at war with them my entire life. I just didn't realize it until they tried to kill the only person who ever made me feel human. This will destroy everything you've built. Then I'll build something better. With you. The words hung in the air between them. A vow, a declaration, a point of no return. Serafina kissed him again, tasting blood and determination and the future they were about to rip from the ashes of everything that came before. When do we start? She asked against his mouth. Now. Lucian stood and made one final call. When the person on the other end answered, he spoke clearly in English so Serafina could understand every word. This is Lucian Moretti. I'm calling an emergency council meeting. Every family head in Chicago, tomorrow night at the Drake Hotel. He paused. And I'm bringing my fiancée. Serafina's eyes went wide. Lucian looked at her steadily while he continued speaking into the phone. Tell them it's mandatory. Tell them the Moretti heir is making an announcement that will reshape the entire city. And tell my mother that if she doesn't attend, I'll consider it an act of war against my future wife. He hung up. The silence that followed felt charged with electricity. Fiancé? Serafina managed. It's the only way to give you protection under Mafia law. As my wife, you become untouchable. Family. Sacred. Lucien crossed back to her, dropping to one knee. I don't have a ring. I don't have pretty words, but I'm asking anyway. Marry me, Serafina Vale. Help me burn down the old empire and build something that doesn't require we sacrifice the people we love to maintain power. Tears streamed down Serafina's face. This was insane, impossible. They'd known each other for weeks, not years. He was a criminal. She was a baker. Their worlds should never have collided, but they had. And standing at the edge of war with blood on her hands and his ringless proposal hanging in the air, Serafina made her choice. Yes. Lucien's expression transformed, relief and love and something that looked like salvation crashing over him in waves. He kissed her like drowning, like breathing, like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to humanity. When they finally broke apart, his forehead pressed against hers, he whispered, Tomorrow we go to war. Together, Serafina said. Together. Outside the penthouse windows, Chicago glittered with indifferent beauty. Thousands of lights marking lives that would never know a baker and a mafia boss had just decided to tear down an empire and rebuild it in their image. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Lucian Moretti would face his family, his enemies, and everyone who thought love was weakness. Tomorrow, they would either emerge victorious or die trying. But tonight, wrapped in each other's arms with their hearts beating in synchronization and the future spreading before them like an unmapped battlefield, they were simply two people who'd chosen each other over everything else. And that was enough. Lucien's phone buzzed with incoming messages, updates on Viviana's location, threats from rival families, demands from his mother. He ignored all of them. Instead, he carried Serafina to his bedroom and laid her down on sheets that smelled like expensive cologne and danger, then curled his body around hers like armor. Sleep, he murmured against her hair. Tomorrow we face the world. Tonight, you're safe. Serafina closed her eyes and let exhaustion claim her, secure in the knowledge that the man holding her would burn down cities before he let anyone hurt her again. And in the morning, when dawn broke over Chicago and painted the sky in shades of gold and blood, they would rise together, ready for war, ready for anything. Because love, real love, the kind that survives kidnapping and betrayal and impossible choices, was stronger than fear, stronger than empires, stronger than everything that tried to tear them apart. Outside, somewhere in the city, Viviana De Luca was planning her next move. Maria Moretti was preparing her defense, and the rival families were sharpening their knives, ready to exploit the chaos they sensed coming. But none of them understood what they were actually facing. They thought Lucien Moretti was just another mafia boss clinging to power. They didn't realize he'd just become something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And tomorrow, when he walked into that council meeting with Serafina on his arm and revolution in his eyes, the entire Chicago underworld would learn exactly what that meant. The game was about to change, and they were holding all the cards. Dawn broke over Chicago like a wound splitting open. Serafina woke to find Lucien already dressed, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows with his phone pressed to his ear and his shoulders carrying the weight of decisions that would reshape the entire city. He looked like what he was, a man preparing for war. She sat up slowly, her body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached, her bandaged wrists throbbed, her feet felt like they'd been shredded and poorly reassembled, but she was alive. And today she would stand beside the most dangerous man in Chicago and watch him burn down an empire built on fear. Lucien ended his call and turned to find her watching him. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Like I got kidnapped, tortured, and chased through a warehouse district by armed men." "So terrible." "Pretty much." He crossed to the bed and sat beside her, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "You don't have to come tonight. I can keep you safe here while I handle—" "Stop." Serafina placed her hand over his. "We do this together, or not at all. They'll try to destroy you. They already tried. I'm still here." Something fierce and proud flashed in Lucien's eyes. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm a baker who fell in love with the wrong man and got dragged into a mafia war. That's not extraordinary. That's catastrophically stupid." "It's both." He kissed her softly, and Serafina tasted coffee and determination on his lips. When they pulled apart, she asked the question that had been burning in her chest since last night. "What happens at this meeting?" "I'm going to offer the family heads a choice. Support my claim to restructure how the Moretti Empire operates or go to war with me." "That's insane. They'll never agree." "Some will. The smart ones who see that the old ways are dying anyway. The younger generation already questions the violence and extortion. I'm just giving them permission to choose something different. And the ones who refuse?" Lucien's expression hardened. "They become enemies." "What about your mother?" "Maria Moretti will have to decide if her pride is worth losing her only son." The words were calm, controlled, but Serafina heard the pain beneath them. For all his strength, Lucien was still about to face the woman who'd raised him and chosen empire over his life. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. This was always coming. You just forced me to stop pretending I could balance both worlds." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come, we need to get you ready." "Ready for what?" "To look like a queen walking into enemy territory." 6 hours later, Serafina stood in Lucien's bedroom staring at her reflection and barely recognizing herself. The dress was midnight black, elegant, expensive, armor disguised as fashion. Her hair had been swept into an elaborate updo by a stylist Lucien had called in, and makeup covered the bruises on her face with professional precision. Diamond earrings glittered at her ears, borrowed from what Lucien had casually referred to as the family vault. She looked like she belonged in his world. The thought should have pleased her. Instead, it felt like watching herself disappear. "You're beautiful," Lucien said from the doorway. Serafina turned to find him in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her car, looking every inch the mafia prince he'd been born to be. "I look like someone else," she said. "You look like yourself dressed for battle." "Is that what this is? Battle?" "Yes." At least he was honest. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Lucien's men entered and spoke rapidly in Italian. Whatever he said made Lucien's jaw tighten. "What is it?" Serafina asked. "Viviana's been spotted. She's already at the Drake Hotel." "She's attending the meeting?" "Apparently. Either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." Lucien's voice turned cold. "Probably both." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Yet." He offered Serafina his arm. "Let her think she's safe. Let her walk into the room believing she still has allies. Then I'll destroy her in front of everyone." They descended to the lobby where 3 black SUVs waited, engines running and windows tinted dark enough to hide sins. Armed men stood at attention, and Serafina realized with a start that these were Lucien's personal soldiers, the ones who'd sworn loyalty to him above the family, the ones who would follow him into war. The drive to the Drake Hotel took 20 minutes through evening traffic. Serafina spent the entire time trying to control her breathing while Lucien made final calls and coordinated with his lieutenants. When they finally pulled up to the hotel, photographers were already waiting. The flash of cameras was blinding. "Smile," Lucien murmured against her ear. "Show them you're not afraid." Serafina lifted her chin and stepped out of the SUV on legs that barely held her weight. She took Lucien's offered arm and walked through a gauntlet of shouting reporters and curious onlookers, keeping her expression carefully neutral. Inside the hotel, things got worse. The ballroom had been transformed into something that looked more like a courtroom than a party. Long tables arranged in a U shape, with the Moretti family crest hanging on the wall like a judge's seal. Men in expensive suits filled the chairs, family heads, underbosses, consiglieri, all watching with predatory focus as Lucien entered with Serafina on his arm. The whispers started immediately. Maria Moretti sat at the head table, her expression carved from ice. Beside her sat men Serafina didn't recognize, but their body language screamed power and danger. And in the corner, wearing a scarlet dress that looked like blood against pale skin, stood Viviana De Luca. Their eyes met across the room. Viviana smiled. It was the smile of someone who thought they'd already won. Serafina's hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms hard enough to draw blood through the bandages. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out before this powder keg exploded and took her with it. But Lucien's hand was steady on her back, guiding her forward to seats positioned directly across from his mother. They sat in silence while the room filled. When the last family head had arrived, Maria Moretti stood. "We're here because my son requested this emergency council," she said, her voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "Lucien, you have the floor." Lucien rose slowly, and Serafina watched the transformation happen in real time. The man who'd held her while she cried disappeared, replaced by something harder, colder, absolutely terrifying in its controlled fury. "Thank you, Mother." The word dripped with venom. "I called this meeting to address several critical issues, the first being treason within our own ranks." Murmurs rippled through the room. 3 days ago, my fiancé was kidnapped, tortured, and nearly murdered by associates of the Calabrese family. More murmurs, heads turning. The kidnapping was orchestrated by someone we all know, someone who sat at this table and broke bread with us while plotting our destruction. Lucien's gaze swept the room and landed on Viviana. "Viviana De Luca, stand up." The room went absolutely silent. Viviana stood slowly, her smile never wavering. "Lucien, I understand you're upset about what happened to your baker, but accusing me without evidence is I have evidence." Lucien nodded to one of his men, who immediately activated a projector. The wall behind the head table lit up with images. Bank records showing money transfers from Viviana to known Calabrese associates. Photographs of her meeting with rival family members. Text messages coordinating the kidnapping. And audio, clear as crystal, of Viviana's voice explaining her plan to an unknown conspirator. "You wanted to start a war," Lucien said quietly. "Congratulations. You succeeded, but it's not the war you expected." Viviana's smile finally cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing. The old families won't let you restructure everything they've built. They'll destroy you first. Then they can try." Lucien turned to address the entire room. "I'm offering everyone here a choice. Support my vision for a modernized Moretti operation, one built on legitimate business, strategic alliances, and reduced violence. Or declare yourselves enemies and face the consequences. This is insanity, one of the older family heads said. We built this empire on fear and power. You can't just, I can, and I will. Lucian's voice cut through the protests. The world is changing. Law enforcement has tools our fathers never dreamed of. The old ways make us vulnerable. Either we adapt or we die. And what about loyalty? Maria Moretti's voice was ice. What about family? You want to talk about family, Mother? Lucien turned to face her fully. Let's talk about how you knew Viviana was planning to murder Serafina and did nothing to stop it. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Maria's expression didn't change. I had no proof of her intentions. You had suspicions, you had warnings, and you chose to let it happen because you thought losing her would make me more committed to the Empire. Lucian's voice shook with barely controlled rage. You sacrificed an innocent woman to your ambition. She's not innocent. She's a distraction, a liability. Maria stood, her presence commanding the room. And you're proving my point right now. You're willing to tear apart everything we've built for a woman you've known for weeks. Yes, the single word landed like a bomb. I'm willing to burn down an empire built on the belief that love is weakness, and loyalty means blind obedience. I'm willing to reshape everything so that the people I care about aren't considered acceptable casualties. Lucien reached for Serafina's hand and pulled her to her feet beside him. This woman survived torture and attempted murder because she was brave enough to love me despite knowing exactly what I am. She's stronger than any of you, and she's going to be my wife. Over my dead body, Maria said coldly. If necessary. Mother and son stared at each other across the table, and Serafina felt the room hold its breath. Then Maria laughed, sharp and bitter. You're just like your father. He also thought love would save him from this life. Want to know how that ended? He died because he trusted the wrong people, because this family values power over everything else, including the lives of its own members. Lucien's voice dropped. I'm breaking that cycle, tonight, here, with all of you as witnesses. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who controls half the family's assets and has the loyalty of the next generation. Lucien turned to address the room. Anyone who supports my claim, stand now. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then a young man near the back stood. Then another. Then 5 more. Within 30 seconds, nearly half the room was on their feet. Maria's expression finally cracked, fury and disbelief warring across her features. You're making a mistake, all of you. The only mistake was waiting this long to challenge you, one of the standing men said. He was older, with gray at his temples and scars on his knuckles. You've ruled through fear for 20 years, Maria. Some of us are tired of being afraid. Then you're traitors. Or we're survivors adapting to a changing world. The room split down the middle, half standing with Lucien, half seated with Maria. The Moretti Empire fracturing in real time. And in the corner, Viviana was edging toward the exit. Don't, Lucien said without looking at her. You leave this room and you're a fugitive. Every family here will hunt you. You'll be dead within the week. Viviana froze. What do you want? Confession. In front of everyone. Tell them what you did, who you worked with, every detail. And if I refuse? Then I release evidence of your crimes to the FBI and let federal prison handle you. Your choice. Viviana's face went white. She was trapped and she knew it. After a long moment, she started talking. She confessed to the kidnapping, the alliance with the Calabrese family, the plan to frame rivals and start a war. She named names, conspirators within the Moretti organization who'd helped her, rival families who'd promised support, corrupt officials who'd turned blind eyes. With every word, the room grew colder. When she finally finished, Lucien nodded to his men. Take her to holding. I'll decide her fate later. They dragged Viviana out while she screamed threats and curses, her perfect facade completely shattered. The room erupted into chaos, family heads shouting at each other, alliances forming and breaking in real time, years of resentment boiling over into open conflict. Maria Moretti stood alone at the head table, watching her empire tear itself apart. Finally, she looked at Lucien. You've destroyed everything. No, I've freed it. What you built was a prison. I'm offering everyone a choice for the first time in their lives. And what happens now? Now the people who support me form a new organization, modern, strategic, still powerful, but not built on endless violence and fear. The ones who oppose me, Lucian shrugged. They can try to rebuild what's left, or they can retire. Their choice. And me? You step down. Tonight. Publicly. Maria's laugh was broken glass. You're asking me to surrender everything I've worked for. I'm asking you to choose your son over your empire. Just one once. The words hung in the air between them. For a long moment, Maria just stared at him. Then she reached up and removed the diamond necklace she wore, a symbol of her position passed down through generations of Moretti matriarchs. She set it on the table. I hope she's worth it, Maria said quietly. She is. Maria left without another word, her spine straight and her head high, walking out of her own empire like a queen abdicating a throne. The room fell silent in her wake. Lucian turned to address the remaining family heads, both those who'd stood with him and those still seated. This is the new reality. Anyone who can't accept it should leave now. No retribution, no consequences, just walk away. 5 men stood and left. The rest remained, and Serafina watched new alliances form in glances and nods and whispered conversations. The Moretti Empire was being rebuilt before her eyes, and at the center of it all stood the man she loved, holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity. They left the Drake Hotel 3 hours later after endless negotiations and temporary truces. The photographers were still waiting, but Serafina barely noticed them now. She was too exhausted to care about cameras or public opinion or anything except getting somewhere quiet where she could finally breathe. Back at the penthouse, Lucien shed his jacket and tie with visible relief, his shoulders sagging slightly now that the performance was over. Is it done? Serafina asked. The first part. The rest will take months, maybe years. He turned to face her. I'm going to be rebuilding an empire from scratch while fighting off challenges from people who preferred the old ways. It's going to be dangerous, complicated, probably impossible. So Tuesday, his laugh was surprised and genuine. You're ridiculous. I'm tired. I know. Lucien crossed to her and carefully removed the diamond earrings, setting them aside with the same precision he applied to everything. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I ran into it willingly, covered in flour and stupid with hope. That night in the cafe feels like a lifetime ago. It was 3 weeks ago. Impossible. And yet, they stood together in the dim penthouse, the city glittering beyond the windows, both of them bruised and exhausted and fundamentally changed by everything they'd survived. What happens now? Serafina asked. Now we figure out how to actually live in the world we just created. Do you regret it? Choosing me over your family? Lucien cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes absolutely certain. Not for a single second. You're the best decision I've ever made. Even if it cost you everything? It didn't cost me everything. It freed me from a life that was suffocating me since birth. He kissed her forehead. You gave me permission to choose something different, to want something more than power and fear and violence. What do you want? You. A life that doesn't require I sacrifice everyone I love to maintain control. Maybe even, he hesitated, peace, eventually. That's a lot to ask for. I know, but with you it feels possible. Serafina leaned into him, letting his warmth chase away the last of the cold fear that had lived in her bones since the kidnapping. I love you, you know that, right? I know. I love you too, even though I'm terrible at saying it. You're better than you think. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the city moved on without them and the future spread out like uncharted territory. Eventually, Lucien pulled back. I have something for you. He disappeared into the bedroom and returned carrying a small velvet box. Serafina's heart stuttered. Lucien, I know I proposed without a ring. That was unacceptable. He opened the box to reveal a diamond so perfect it seemed to capture light and refused to release it. This belonged to my grandmother, the only member of my family who ever chose love over duty. She'd want you to have it. Serafina stared at the ring through tears. It's beautiful. So are you. He slid it onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Marry me, Serafina Vale. For real this time. Not for protection or politics or empire. Just because I love you and I want to spend whatever life I have left, making sure you never regret choosing me. Yes, she whispered. Always yes. He kissed her then, soft and slow, and full of promises about futures they would build together from the wreckage of everything that came before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Serafina asked the question that had been burning in her chest. What about the bakery? What about my life? What about it? I can't just become some mafia wife who plans charity galas and pretends not to know what her husband does. I don't want you to. Lucian smiled. I want you to open that dream bakery you talked about. I want to watch you build something with your own hands that has nothing to do with my world. And I want to show up every morning to drink terrible coffee and eat whatever experimental pastry you're testing. That's not very mafia boss of you. Good, I'm trying to be something different. And if your enemies use the bakery to get to you, then I'll burn down their entire organization until they learn that threatening you is a death sentence. His expression turned serious. I won't lie and say this life is safe. It's not. But I'll spend every day protecting you and building something better. That's the best I can offer. It's enough, but 6 months later, Serafina stood in front of a storefront in Lincoln Park and stared at the sign above the door. Veil and Velvet. Her dream bakery, real, solid, hers. The renovation had taken 4 months and more money than she wanted to think about, but Lucien had insisted on making it perfect. Marble countertops, professional-grade ovens, a coffee bar that looked like art, display cases designed to showcase pastries like jewels, and in the back, a private kitchen where she could experiment without customers watching. Ready? Jasmine asked, appearing beside her with keys. I think so. You think so? Girl, we're opening in 10 minutes. I know, Serafina looked at her best friend. What if I fail? Then you fail. And you get back up and try again. That's literally what you've been doing your entire life. Jasmine hugged her fiercely. You survived falling in love with a mafia boss and getting kidnapped by his psychotic ex-girlfriend. Running a bakery is going to be boring in comparison. From your mouth to the universe's ears. They unlocked the door together. The line of customers waiting outside was longer than Serafina had dared hope. Some were regulars from her old job. Others were people who'd read about the baker who'd tamed Lucien Moretti and wanted to see her in person. And at the end of the line, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suits, stood Lucien. He'd promised to come for opening day. He'd kept his promise. The morning passed in a blur of orders and coffee and pastries that disappeared faster than she could bake them. Serafina worked with practiced efficiency, her hands remembering rhythms she'd honed over years, her body finding joy in the familiar ache of standing on her feet, creating something beautiful. When the lunch rush finally slowed, she found Lucien still sitting at a corner table with a cappuccino and a lemon lavender cookie, the same kind she'd brought to their first meeting. How's it taste? She asked, sliding into the chair across from him. Like the night I fell in love with you. Sentimental. Honest. Serafina smiled and reached across the table to lace her fingers through his. The diamond on her left hand caught the light, sending rainbow fractals across the table. They were getting married in 2 months, a small ceremony with just close friends and the few family members Lucien still spoke to after the Empire restructuring. Nothing fancy, nothing public, just them and the people they loved making promises about forever. You did it, Lucien said quietly. You built this. We built this. You funded it. Money is just money. You're the one who turned it into something that makes people happy. He lifted her hand and kissed her bandaged knuckles. She'd burned herself on an oven that morning in the pre-opening chaos. I'm proud of you. The words settled in her chest like warmth. Outside the window, Chicago moved on with its endless rhythm, cars honking, people rushing to meetings, the city breathing with the chaotic energy that had defined it for centuries. But inside Veil and Velvet, time moved slower. Here, surrounded by the smell of vanilla and cinnamon and fresh bread, Serafina had carved out a space that belonged only to her. A place where flower-covered hands and honest dreams mattered more than power or violence or the weight of empires. Lucien still had his businesses, Legitimate now, mostly, though Serafina knew better than to ask too many questions about certain operations. The restructuring hadn't been easy. Several families had fractured, old allies had become enemies. His mother had moved to Italy, and they spoke maybe once a month through terse phone calls. But Lucien was still standing, still fighting to build something different. And every night he came home to her, tired and stressed and carrying burdens she couldn't fully understand. And she fed him dinner and listened to him talk and reminded him why he'd chosen this harder path. Because love, it turned out, was the strongest empire of all. "I have to get back to work," Serafina said reluctantly. "I know, I'll wait." "You don't have to." "I want to." So Lucien sat in the corner of her bakery like a guardian angel in designer jeans, drinking coffee and working on his laptop while Serafina served customers and decorated cakes and lived the life she'd almost died fighting for. When closing time finally came and the last customer had left, Serafina locked the door and turned to find Lucien watching her with an expression that stole her breath. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just—" He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to run through a storm that night. For choosing me despite knowing what I was. For surviving when I thought I'd lost you." His voice roughened. "For teaching me that there's more to life than fear and power." Serafina wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him softly. "You taught me things too." "Like what?" "That people are more than their worst choices. That love is worth fighting for even when it's terrifying. That sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is also the kindest." "I'm not kind." "You are to me." They swayed together in the empty bakery, the evening light streaming through the windows and painting everything gold. This was peace. This was home. This was everything they'd fought and bled and nearly died to build. Outside, somewhere in Chicago, enemies were plotting. Rivals were planning their next moves. The Moretti Empire, smaller now, restructured, still dangerous but different, continued its complicated existence. But inside Veil and Velvet, surrounded by the evidence of dreams made real, Serafina Veil held the man she loved and felt something she hadn't felt since that first night in the rain. Hope. Not the naive kind that ignored danger. The earned kind. The kind that survived kidnapping and betrayal and impossible choices to emerge stronger on the other side. "Dance with me," Lucien said suddenly. "There's no music." "I don't care." So they danced in the fading light, two broken people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided that love, messy, terrifying, absolutely worth it love, was stronger than anything trying to tear them apart. And when Lucien finally pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes were soft with something that looked like contentment. "I love you, Serafina Moretti." She wasn't Moretti yet, not officially, but the name settled around her shoulders like a promise. "I love you too," she whispered back. They left the bakery together as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded Serafina of frosting and hope and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, walking hand in hand through the city that had nearly destroyed them both, they were simply two people who'd chosen each other over everything else. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.